Hey skate builders, today we're going to go over building an electric skateboard with two motors. For this build, we'll go ahead and use Miami Electric Board's newest 12S 3P battery with a 12S BMS with a power switch. We'll be using our new Stealth hub motors as well as two OESCs. For this build, you'll also need a parallel adapter for the battery to the OESCs. You'll need two motor adapters for the motor sensors to connect to the OESCs, as well as I will show you how to use either a split PPM connection to one receiver or how to connect them using the Canbus and a cable to one receiver. You can also additionally add an optional Bluetooth adapter. For the build, you want to actually go ahead and start off by connecting the battery to the BMS. So for the battery, we'll go ahead and plug in the power cables and then the balance cables to the BMS. Make sure those are nice and secure. We'll also go ahead and plug in our switch. Now, we're going to want to go ahead and connect our parallel adapter to the output of the BMS. We'll want to go ahead and connect our OESCs. Now onto here, just simply connect the motors to your OESC. The motor sensor pins are these top ones. And this is a quick build. For your official build, you want to go ahead and make sure that you zip tie everything nicely so that nothing is rattling around inside your case. So now that this is all connected, I will go ahead and program these using either receiver as well as our CAN cable. Okay, so once everything is initially connected, you're going to want to decide how you want to connect both of these ESCs together, whether it's going to be through split PPM using both of the PPM wires to one receiver, or if you want to use a Canbus adapter, which would be a Canbus cable connected to both of these, where one would be the master, one would be the slave, and then you would just use one PPM cable to one receiver. So to start off, I'm going to show you the split PPM method using our handheld remote, which has two sets of PPM pins. So the split happens right on the board. There's no need for an adapter. For this, it's quite simple. You just have to go ahead and connect both PPM wires onto the receiver. Now, on your PC, make sure you have the VESC tool ready to go. We'll go ahead and connect our first OESC onto the PC. So on the computer, you can hear the VESC connected. So on the VESC tool, you'll want to make sure you connect. Now you want to make sure both of these are on the same version. So before anything, make sure you go over to firmware and you check your firmware version. Well, this one is 3.3.4. This is the latest version. If it is not, you're going to have to make sure you click on your corresponding hardware. Mine is 412, as well as the corresponding firmware. It's default, and make sure you upload that firmware onto the VESC. However, since this one's fully uploaded, we'll go ahead back to the home page and we'll start our setup. Now we're going to want to do our motor setup first. So make sure you run the motor setup wizard. This will be BLDC. Now, when you're using split PPM, these are the values that are going to change. Normally, if it was 1 motor, you would set this to 25. However, since I'm using 2, I can set anywhere between 12 and 20. I'm going to go ahead and set it up with 12. And our regenerative braking will be -6. The motor current and motor current max brake are both 60 and -60. So hit next. This is a 12S battery, so make sure you apply 12S settings. And we are using a sensor cable. Now we'll run our motor detection. Make sure there's nothing in the way because the motor will spin right now. Hit OK. So now that we got a good detection, we'll apply those settings and hit next and finish. As you can see, the bottom green text, it wrote those settings successfully. So now we'll go ahead and set up a remote. So select Input Setup Wizard, and we'll just choose the first option. This is for a split PPM setup. PPM input. Here you want to calibrate your remote. So make sure your remote is on and go all the way up and down. Do that a couple times so that the tool reads the correct results. You want to apply those settings. Hit next. Now, my control type, I usually end up picking current, no reverse with brake. And I end up changing the ramping down to 1 or 0.10. I'll write these configurations to the VESC. You see the green text, the confirmation, and hit finish. So that was the first VESC. I'm going to make sure you disconnect now. And connect to the next VESC. You can hear the confirmation. And if you remember, the first one was on firmware 3.34. This one is also. But again, if it wasn't, just make sure you select your correct hardware and firmware and upload so that they're both matching. We'll go back to the setup wizard and we'll apply the same settings that we used on the first VESC. That's the key to the split PPM. They both need to be identical settings. The only difference will be the motor detection. Those will be independent to whatever motor is connected to that VESC. So 12, -6 were our options before. Then we set this as a 12S battery. We are using a sensor on this as well. Make sure there's nothing in the way. Apply those results and finish. Then we're going to go back to the input setup wizard. Same thing, the first option, PPM. And again, you're going to have to now here, as you can see, I was going to spin my motor when I use it. It's going to give me a bad reading, so I'm actually going to go ahead and unplug this VESC. I had to reconnect the VESC to the receiver since only one of these is providing power. So I'll go back and now adjust my remote settings. Make sure you do this a couple times so it gets the proper setting. Go ahead and apply that. Now we had the same current, no reverse with brake, and change this over to 0.10. And we'll write that onto the VESC. Hit next and finish. Now we'll quickly power this off. I'll go ahead and reconnect my VESC. Connect the PPM signal. Right. Now power it back on. And we should get both of our motors spinning. Now, on this example, this motor is spinning one way and this motor is spinning the other. This one is spinning correctly, so we actually want to correct the direction on this one. That's pretty easy to do with the VESC tool. So we'll go ahead and reconnect onto this VESC. You can hear the confirmation on the computer. So go ahead and connect. And we actually want to navigate over to the Motors tab in General. And there's a setting that says Invert Motor Direction. You want to flip that over to True. Now you want to go ahead and write these configuration onto your VESC. And now if we try spinning them again, they're both spinning the correct orientation. Now we're going to go ahead and set up these VESCs with a Canbus cable instead of 2 PPM cables. Here you want to make sure you decide which VESC is going to be your master and which one will be the slave. Mine have 2 different colored cables, so I'm going to go ahead and make the yellow cables the slave, and I'll put away this PPM cable. Just wrap it around real quickly. Right it under there. Now, before I connect my CAN adapter, I'm actually going to head and program these. So, since this one will be my master, we'll go ahead and start off with that one. So make sure you connect. Power on your build. Alright, so now on the VESC tool, same as before, they both need to be on the same firmware version. Again, make sure you check that before starting. You want to head over to the Welcome Wizard. Same initial setup as the motor. So you want to make sure you run through your motor setup first. Now this one's already been set up, so all we're going to do is change the input wizard. Come here, hit next, yes. Now this is where you're going to use this option, where you want to set up your VESC as the master. Hit next. Now each one is going to have a unique VESC ID. This one will be 0. We'll be using a PPM connection on this one. So if you want, I'll go ahead and plug in my receiver for my small remote. Now this one can only accept the 1 cable. So make sure you run through the same process of configuring your pulse signal. So it takes a few tries to get it right. But once it's all good, hit next. And I'll go ahead and configure this the same way. Current, no reverse with brake. Change this to 0.10. And write this to VESC. next and finish. So now that that one's done, we'll go ahead and configure the slave. This one's probably the easiest setup, since you really only have to configure the first VESC, because as you'll see now, once we connect to the new one, we'll go ahead and go to the same input setup wizard, hit next, and you choose the third option. This is your other VESC, not the master, the slave. Hit next, give it a unique ID, so this one will be 1, and you're done. Now for this, you also want to make sure you run the motor setup and configure your VESC for that specific motor. Now we'll go ahead and power off these VESCs, and we'll connect the CAN cable. So now this is connected via CAN, and then there's only the one receiver. We'll turn these back on, and we should be able to see our motor spin now. Now both of these are spinning the correct way. If you remember, we fixed that spinning orientation on the previous explanation. So these are both properly set up. Now, lastly, if you wanted to connect a Bluetooth adapter, I've always had luck connecting it to the master. So I'll go ahead and do that. So now that that one's connected, I'll go ahead and program the master back to the proper Bluetooth settings. So for this, you want to go to your general settings, we're going to actually read what's on there. And you see there's PPM and UART setup. So we'll go over to our UART and change this to 9,600 and write that. We should now be able to go over to our app. And if you can see, it connects over to the VESC, and now I'm getting live data. Right from my phone. So I hope this helps and answers your questions on setting up a dual motor electric skateboard. For more help, please visit miamielectricskateboards.com.